Wrist Talks, but this time with a different avatar. This time it's not Wrist Talks with BWE. We've had many episodes out there, and now it's RedBar Bombay. So just to give a little bit of a brief to everyone out here, so Bombay Watch Enthusiasts was a community or is a community based out of Bombay, India. We have members from all over the world, and we are kind of growing, and then we said, what is the next logical step, right? So we discussed with RedBar, and we got RedBar into India. So RedBar is a global community. I mean, I think most of you all know. So just to give a brief on that one. So RedBar is a global watch community. It was founded by Adam Kranoitz and his friends a few years back, after which it has grown all over the world with different chapters. And India didn't have a RedBar chapter, which was kind of annoying all of us for the last year. And then we said, we have to do something about this. We have to get RedBar to India. And then the migration happened. Bombay Watch Enthusiasts expanded into becoming the first chapter of RedBar in India, RedBar Bombay. So welcome. We are very thankful for you guys to join in our first session. It really means a lot to us. And obviously, because of the pandemic, physical meetings are kind of a no-no, especially in Bombay at this time. The cases are on the rise. So virtual meetings are the way to go. This is a series which we started during the pandemic again last year. And we've been doing few episodes with different guests, just discussing watches, with enthusiasts, with watchmakers, with watch engineers, with certain people who are from the watch industry from a service angle. And today we have Ariel, who's from the media side of it. So again, welcome, and I'll give it up to Vritti. Vritti, thank you so much for setting this up. She's a part of our core group, and she's really working hard with all of us to kind of set these events up. So Vritti, here goes.
Thank you, Puneet. Welcome, Ariel. It's really great to have you here. And I'll quickly introduce you. Ariel is one of the most influential persons in the watch media. And I remember him to be someone who was one of the first who made watch blogging a serious business. He's also one of those who's been in all these days available at this crazy, uh, time. It's 2 a.m. there, and he's taken this effort to join us here. Uh, he is an opinion leader and has quite an impactful voice. He's been very vocal about his opinions, and that makes him one of the best, in my opinion, one of the best uh, persons in the watch media. And his content has been one of my go-tos for my research when I was designing. Welcome, Ariel. It's very, very good to have you here.
I had to unmute myself. Thank you, Freddie. That was a very, very fine introduction. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me to be able to speak to the collector groups everywhere. Just so everyone knows, I'm normally awake at 2 a.m., so I didn't have to kill myself for this. And if there's anything I've learned from being in this industry is that the meaning of time is highly relevant.
Right. Nicely put. Cool. So, Ariel, let's just jump into the topic, media, right? So, online media, right now, it's, I think, the most relevant topic for all of us. We are really exposed to it more than what we were earlier. So just for us to understand, you are there in the industry since a very long time. So how did this whole revolution, I mean, I'm not talking about the pandemic right now, I'm talking pre-pandemic times also. There's a lot of these, media houses which used to put up so much media there. So what was the start? Did it start from something like a Reddit or a Watch Recon, or did it start from a normal blog? What was it like?
Well, so I started aBlogtoWatch in 2007. And at the time, the internet was quite active with watch enthusiasts, mainly in the form of forums and things like that. So Watch You Seek and Time Zone were really the predominant form of what you would say was watch media online. And it was totally, crowdsourced. It was just people having their input, making posts. It wasn't anything like official media. And then, of course, you had the world of print media, and you had magazines all over the world, in various different types of places. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Watch media as sort of phenomenon really started in the 1980s in Europe, with certain places like Germany and Italy, and there was some little niche brochures and pamphlets. Some of them were price guides. It was really for these very small numbers of people that were collecting watches. At the time, watches that today would be considered extremely valuable were worth almost nothing, and you could find them in flea markets and secondhand stores and things like that. A lot, of course, has changed. In the 1990s, watch media became a business that started to be funded by watch brand advertisers. Watch brands recognized that they were reaching a lot of people that were buying watches, and they were also making people watch lovers. Watch media was almost exclusively to thank for informing people of new models and things like that. So watch media started to really become important in the 1990s. But what quickly happened, and this is the point that I wanted to get to, was that watch media in print was never really able to have a voice. And what I mean by that, it was able to express information, but never really opinions. The second that they would do anything like that, they would be sort of slapped by the advertisers. And so watch media, when I was emerging as a collector, was basically an extension of a catalog or marketing material. And very, very rarely did you find anything that looked to be opinion. I grew up in a consumer product review culture. I read magazines about cars. I read magazines about all different types of things. And there was this culture about reviewing products. And I recognized that outside of individual consumers who had bought a watch and maybe took the time to write a post on a forum with no thanks whatsoever for the most part, there wasn't any form of consumer media out there that really told people how to buy a watch and how to know a good watch from a watch that wasn't right for you and things like that. So I really took it upon myself to try to create a consumer review style media for watches. And, it grew into something which has been very popular because I think it's been necessary. I think that people deserve to hear honest information about watches before they ever consider buying them. But it also been sort of a Sisyphusian battle, uphill pushing a boulder, because the industry that we inherently support and help make a lot of money has a lot of emotion and ego behind it, and they have a big problem with anything related to negativity. What I've learned is that in Europe, where a lot of the decision making around luxury watches happens, there isn't the same culture of consumer reviews. They don't have like car review magazines and things like that, or at least not to the same extent. So there's, I think the most dynamic part of the watch industry, as well as the most challenging part, is the various different types of cultures and values that come in to make this global industry. That's what makes it beautiful, but that's what sometimes also makes it infuriating. Hope that wasn't too long of an answer.
No, it was, I mean, yeah, right. I mean, so it was an uphill boulder pushing kind of an activity for everyone. I agree. But, you mentioned that in terms of the media, there are, so what I've understood from the watch media, what I've read is that there are these articles which are coming out of press releases. And then there are these articles which are either opinions of people, like you said, negative or positive, or there are articles which are technical out there. So our question is that who is the audience of the watch media? Because if you think about it, a normal person who's not too interested in watches might not go and read it. You know what I mean? Because it's not factual, it's not news. So it's a very specific audience out there. So I mean, I would club it with another question saying that, is that audience the same, or has the pandemic kind of increased that audience because of obviously sitting at home?
Well, that's a few really good questions in one, and I'll try to break them apart and talk about this notion of talking to the same sort of native audience over and over and over again. Yes, there are certain circles where you're just speaking to the same group of people around the world time and time and time again. The auction world is kind of like it. The auction world doesn't really attract a lot of new people. It's sort of the same group of characters that go to the auctions all the time. When aBlogtoWatch was just a few years old, I recognized that we were sort of bringing in a lot of new people into the hobby. They would discover aBlogtoWatch from a tech website that might link to us or something like that. And I had this sort of goal. It wasn't like something I could ever measure, but I said, if I turn one person into a watch lover every single day, I feel really good about it, because I think this is a hobby that a lot of people enjoy. And so I always tried to have a conversation around these products that was inclusive of others. And that was very different than what was going on before aBlogtoWatch started. You look at a time zone, for example, it was not inclusive, it was exclusive. You had to be part of the club. Sometimes you actually had to register and be approved to join. You could only talk about a certain number of topics. There were certain things that you could say that would get you banned right away. And they were not trying to appeal to people that were not part of that world. If you didn't like get watches, they didn't want to talk to you. And for me, that was always very self-defeating, because while I understand sort of in a club mentality that works, from a media perspective, you want to attract as many people as possible. You want to cast as wide a net as you can. So there are many very deep intellectual, mechanical topics and issues of history and culture and art and design that you can go into in watches. But there are certain fundamental things that most consumers can appreciate if you explain to them properly. So I like to engage in sort of a storytelling and explanation perspective on watches, rather than speaking to sort of this, very exclusive group, which I think, again, defeats the purpose of media.
Fair enough. Yep. So I think a lot of us will agree with that. And in terms of what you read might be similar, but the way it's written, the storytelling part of it, which you mentioned right now, which is important because it should be enticing. Because so we have so many options. Let's face it. We have something coming from the brands, which the brands have their own websites and their own media handles, social media handles. So they are giving you the new releases. They're giving you all the technicalities out there. Then we have the media houses, which is giving us, again, a lot of technicalities. The press releases are kind of similar out there. That's what we've kind of observed. And then you have the opinions from the bloggers, vloggers, a million other YouTube vloggers out there. So there is so much information out there if you think about it.
Let me break some things down for you, because I appreciate that it's easy to be super intimidated. And thank you for listing just some of the many types of places for information. You as a consumer of any luxury good have every reason to be highly skeptical of what information is being delivered to you. You have to understand that I believe that there needs to be at least three parties in the sort of ecosystem of watches. And this is not just watches. You need to have the watch manufacturer, the watch retailer, and watch media. The watch manufacturer makes the product. Without them, there wouldn't be anything to talk about. Watch media connects with the watch manufacturer to inform people about these products, get a conversation going, and help connect the right person to the right product. And the watch retailer is there to romance people into buying something, into buying again, being there when there's an occasion to buy. These three entities should not ever be combined. They can move around in terms of what they focus on, but these three entities really sort of have to be there in the watch ecosystem. And so depending on where you're getting information, there's going to be a different agenda. Watchmakers want you to believe their product is as expensive as possible and as awesome as possible and as legitimate and important as possible. And watch retailers want you to buy as much as possible. Watch media has a completely different incentive, and watch media's incentive is to have a conversation and to share. It's very conversational, it's educational. It's really about community and having a shared interest. And so I think what every consumer can do is, when they hear information, ask themselves, who is talking to me? If it's someone that sells watches, well, then they probably have the sales interest. Someone that makes watches, they probably have this sort of value interest. They want to sort of convey a high sense of value. If it's media, they're not trying to do either of those things. They're just trying to sort of be more evangelical about the hobby. We want you to care about this item. We want you to think it's cool. We want you to come talk to people who also like it. So when you see information, just ask yourself who it's coming from. And I think that most consumers can deduct the rest of it.
I would like to add 2 points to that. The first is that instead of 3, I would now take it to a 4th level
Let's hear it.
The 4th one is the community. Community is the watch community as such. I'm talking about the buyer himself, who then become the community when they are in the group, right? So
that's the commodity, right? The commodity which is traded between the manufacturer, the media, and the sales is the consumer. So the consumer is definitely part of it. Don't get me wrong. But you're right. If you have sort of consumer-based media, it falls into the media category. But you know what? 3 elements, 4 elements. The bottom line is it needs to have a few different players. It's not just watch brand buyer.
Yeah. And I think the media can be again broken down into who is writing something, right? At the end of the day, now slowly, apart from the I mean, from the mainstream media, leave away watches. For mainstream media, we have some good big reporters who we start, trusting. And if it's this reporter in India, we have a few. Globally, we have a few reporters which are good. And again, I'm seeing that kind of a twist in the whole online media for watches also. That when it comes from a particular reporter or a writer, a journalist, it's trusted. Yes, the house is obviously there. There's a house backing that person, but maybe sometimes that person is just on Instagram or just a YouTube video. So media is now getting more focused, which is, I think, a good thing, because people are not looking at just a website as a label, but also looking at going into the writer who's actually writing it, or the way, like you said earlier, it's being written. But one more point, Ariel, is that you mentioned that media is supposed to be neutral of sorts, right? But we are seeing that a lot of media houses, like any other non-watch media house, is slowly getting encroached by these watch companies. I mean, when I say encroach, I mean taken over, or buying stake of it, which is normal, right? Which is absolutely normal. So do you think that is kind of, we know there was a recent takeover, not a takeover, but a recent merger which happened a few months back during the lockdown. So do you think that reading that particular website as a consumer, I should feel they are biased or they're not? I told you I might put you in a spot sometimes.
Look, again, you've asked a lot of fantastic things, multiple things to respond to there. The two words that I want people to think about are bias and transparency. There is no media without bias. Removal of bias, having neutrality, this doesn't really exist. This is an aim, this is a goal, this is a value, this is not a reality. I have bias. There's things I like and there's things that I don't like. But the goal is as much transparency over bias as possible. When you have a friend that's close to you, you know that friend, even though they mean well, they have biases. So you just have to filter things out. But because they're your friend, they're transparent, or at least hopefully transparent about what their biases are. So I think that transparency is really what consumers should be looking for, because bias is inherent. I think that people should sort of be expose their bias, talk about it, own their biases. Maybe you might think of those as just preferences, or particular experiences. Now, media in this industry has had to struggle with a lot of very interesting challenges. One of the challenges is that it's been very hard for watch media to find advertisers outside of the watch space. We've tried it a lot. Pretty much every single publication has. And it's not that watch media isn't attractive. It's that the larger industry for advertising, you've heard it before, is going through hard times. It's because there is the perception of infinite advertising impressions. It used to be that if you wanted to advertise in, say, the city of Bombay, okay, you had a certain amount of billboard space, a certain amount of pages in magazines, a certain amount of TV time and radio time. There was a finite amount of advertising space that you could buy, and you could canvas the entire city. It was a lot, maybe, but there was a finite amount. The internet made advertising space virtually infinite, which turned advertising space as a commodity into like a penny stock. It almost became worthless. Certain advertising space was worth more than others, but on a global perspective, you could basically spend infinite amount of money in advertising. And as an advertiser, you cannot spend an infinite amount. So you had to limit yourself. The sort of sophistication.
Hello.
The sophistication to purchase advertising is one that does not come inherent to a lot of different companies, especially in the advertising space, in the luxury space. Okay, so what that means is that buying advertising in media was never a priority for a lot of the people that wanted to reach a watch customer, at least traditionally. Nowadays, watch brands all have, the ones that used to be the biggest spenders, where they were corporate-owned brands, those are now some of the smallest spenders. This is all to say that most watch media has really struggled to pay the bills. And because of that, you're seeing a lot of these problems happen right now. I think a good approach for the consumer, if they value watch media, is to buy watches from brands that they see support watch media. Because when they advertise in watch media, what it really says is two things. One, I'm telling you, watch consumer, that I have a product that I think is good for you, right? They really believe, they're willing to spend money to reach the consumer because they think they have something they like. Two, this is an advertiser which values that there needs to be a healthy ecosystem. So I think what the future is consumers probably having to vote with their dollars to support brands, to support watch media, And very likely the future is also going to be some type of increase in subscription models where the consumers are going to pay for quality media. So I think all the problems you're talking about, they don't have simple solutions. You're going to have some media move in the direction of being paid for by the consumer, and a lot of media moving in the direction of becoming watchdoors. Because especially in America, I don't know in other parts of the world, I imagine it's very similar. There aren't a lot of good third-party watch retailers online where they have sort of multi-brand boutiques. And so I think that a lot of watch media today is going to evolve into the next generation of watch retailer.
Right, right. No, makes sense. And like, yeah, I agree that, I mean, these questions or these problems for the enthusiast who wants a honest opinion out of what he wants to buy or the research. So let's get into research a little bit. So I think um, uh, most of us out here are watch enthusiasts or watch collectors, and we want to kind of get into or buy a particular timepiece because of the history or maybe some research. Maybe not only history, but also some significance in terms of technicalities or something like that. Now we just heard. I don't know if it's true. You should tell me whether the Patek memorandum, is it true, which just released yesterday. They said that we are not going to share the archives for more than once in 5 years for a particular watch.
Look,
no, history.
these companies,
my point being that it's about history. So when we do research, is watch media a good source to get to know about the watch's history?
I think that people's best tools to determine what watch they want to buy, first and foremost, is their eyes. This is a very visual hobby. You need to buy things and wear things that you love to look at. And so the most important thing is figure out things that appeal to you visually. You have to look at the watch. Other people have to look at the watch. This is by far the most important thing. Not price, not legacy, not history. Your eyes are going to be the biggest thing that move you. But once you have 10 or 15 watches and you all like them visually, then you have to ask yourself, well, how do I choose? I can't have all 15, or maybe you can, but usually you can't have all 15. So to narrow it down, you have to do what I call finding the icing on the cake. Maybe there's a history, maybe there's a rarity, maybe there's a particular sort of status symbol appeal to one product or another. And for a lot of people that appreciate history, like the intellectual element of history, a watch with good history is really appealing. Now, watch brands try to co-opt this by making up fake history or embellishing history, and this happens a lot of the time. And I think the auction houses are probably to blame for putting history too much front and center as the buying process. You know, they can wax poetic about some story, get you emotionally involved, and all of a sudden something's worth $100,000 more than last time. Well, that's a persuasive technique. That's not really about value. I mean, when the same exact watch has no value, but has value after someone puts a story on it, you have to ask yourself, what are you really buying? Because the value of that watch is only as good as the next person knowing the story. So if you're really interested in buying history, you should buy popular histories. If it's some little niche history that only you know about, chances are no one else is going to value it like you. If you are a personal watch collector, and when I say that, I mean someone that just likes watches for themselves and doesn't really care what others think about it, by all means do that. And there's a lot of people that do that, but that's a more mature watch collector who's been doing this for like 10 or 20 years. People that are fresher to the hobby still really want to have conversations about their watches. So I would say when it comes to histories, buy the histories that are sort of the most well talked about, well established, most well researched. If something is being hidden away by a brand, assume they're hiding something that you don't want to know about because it's not very pretty or sexy.
Right. So that's a good point. I mean, first trust your eyes or buy what you like, and then that's a very interesting point which you made out there, that sometimes history is overrated. I mean, it would be safe to say that, because come on, it's a watch, it's something intimate, it's something personal. I'll tell you something which is happening in our chapter and also in India and globally. You might agree that suddenly the watch enthusiast or the watch buyer has got, I would be saying the word, influenced a lot by the media in terms of a particular brand, and it's Cartier, right? So we are seeing this spike in Cartier prices. We're seeing a spike in Cartier aspirations. Vintage, fair enough. You know, there's a lot of history again there, and people want to buy the Cartier history, but also new watches. All of a sudden, we are seeing a frenzy of Cartier out there. So my question is that watch media, I mean, online media, watch related media, does it have a extremely large influence on the buyer, out of your experience, or it's just one of those factors which the buyer is going to look at and then go and make a decision about his watch? And when I say media, I mean everything: social media and reviews, blogs, everything.
Well, social media is just a different form of conversation, right? And I think that what we agree upon is that if you don't actively have conversations and think about these products, you're probably not assigned too much value to them. So in a lot of real ways, this buying behavior wouldn't even happen without the media. You wouldn't even know these watches exist to buy in the first place. Most people go into physical watch stores very rarely, actually. The practice of being a watch collector in modern times is heavily about being on the internet and looking at watch media. So I would say that watch media is almost entirely responsible for a lot of watch enthusiast behavior. There'd be almost none of it without it. So I think that that's really the important thing about the media. Now, I want to bring sort of the example of what I call the sheep herder, because you were talking about Cartier. And the sort of community that tries to boost up values is a lot like a sheep herder. And the idea is the flock of sheep are the collectors, and there's the herder moving them along to some fresh area. Look, there's fresh grass over here, which could be, no one really cares about Cartier vintage watches. Let's move all the sheep over there. They'll nibble on it because there's a lot of grass. And then when they've eaten all that up and they're done, they'll look over there where maybe there's some other grass which has had some time to grow. Maybe it's vintage Longines watches or whatever, and they'll walk over there. So that community is highly transitory in their interest, because they'll go up and they'll buy whatever's up in the market. Then prices will go up and people will be like, this is stupid. And then they'll find the vintage watches from somewhere else. That's really all that behavior is. And so again, when I go back to sort of like, buying with your eyes, if you like vintage this or new Cartier, get it. You don't need to wait till everyone's interested in it. It doesn't mean anything other than the herders move the sheep in that direction.
Right. I mean, that's very well put up. And the point before this, which you made, was that almost 100%, the consumer is going to be affected by the media. And now we're talking about the sheep herder point out here. That means that, a lot of control is given by us to media, or is it the other way around? Or I don't, there's no answer to this, but just to throw some light on it. So what should we do as a consumer? I think everyone out here is a consumer, and then we're thinking, should we believe or trust everything which media says, or what should we do? Because we are getting influenced by it for sure. So how do we go about not getting too influenced and then getting into the herd?
Actually,
Look,
Puneet,
it's a wonderful topic that I've written, I mean, so many thousands of words about over the years, because you're right. No matter how much you talk about it, people are still insecure about buying for themselves. That's the key issue that you need to deal with. There's an insecurity behind buying what you like. You know what you like, but you might be insecure about it. And when you're insecure about it, you're worried about wasting something, losing money, maybe somebody saying something nasty about your watch or something like that. But it's insecurity that you need to get over. Once you get over insecurity, you are free. You are free to buy what you like. Now, consumerism, Western style consumerism at its best, is designed to make the consumer happy. When it works, when the system works and you make more money than you spend and buying something new should make you happy. And in a world like today, where happiness for a lot of people is a little bit as a deficit, I support anything that makes you happy. So when you buy a watch you like at a price you can afford, the goal should be to be happy. If you find yourself buying watches and you're not happy, you have to ask yourself, what went wrong? Was it that I don't really like watches? Or maybe I spent more than I thought I needed to? Maybe I had wrong expectations. Maybe I didn't even really like the design. Maybe I was trying to make someone else happy. Maybe I didn't actually know what I was doing and I listened to someone else. If you don't educate yourself on how to buy watches and how to appreciate watches, and most importantly, what you like, you shouldn't be buying watches. So to be influenced is fine, but to be influenced without asking questions, that's the problem. You have to ask questions in this hobby. If you don't constantly ask questions and then answer them, you're not going to get anywhere.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
yeah, Ariel, that's a very, very good answer. And I just wanted to actually ask you, Puneet has been asking a lot of questions which are, connection related to how these entities play together with each other. And you've been answering them perfectly. But I was just thinking that it would be perhaps better, at least personally for me, to understand exactly what the relationship is between the watch industry per se, like the watch brands, mainly, and the watch media. I want you to elaborate just on that relationship so that I can better understand all of these things you're talking about with regards to transparency, biases, how the consumer should look at the media they're consuming or the information they're consuming. I think I would be able to better understand it. I hope I,
Sure, sure.
yeah.
I'll do my best to sort of explain it. That's a great question. And of course, I know the general sort of framework, but I can only speak for aBlogtoWatch, right? I can't say how other companies have relationships with brands because I imagine it's different. Um, okay, so the first point of contact that most media have with a brand is either an in-house PR person or some type of third-party PR person hired by some agency or something like that. And the goal is to get the media to just write about for free the brand. Sometimes they send assets, sometimes there's invitations to see the product. But the goal is to get the media to cover the brand. It's not a business relationship. It's just, a media to media relationship. Then sometimes media is able to have a business relationship with brands where they speak to a different department. Usually it's like a marketing department, and they'll talk about maybe some content services or advertising or something like that. That's a different conversation usually. Sometimes some of the same people are involved, but it's a different relationship. At aBlogtoWatch, what we do is we make sure that the opinions we have about products has nothing to do with whether or not someone's advertising. But look, we're human. If there's a company which has been supporting us for a long time, are we just naturally going to want to be more supportive of them? Yeah, because they're supporting our ability to do our job. They've been really consistent with the community. We've probably had them as an advertiser because they make a good product. But we're sort of very open about it. It's sort of very obvious. And again, if they make a product we don't like, we don't cover it. That happens all the time. We have advertisers that want us to cover something which is new that we're like, you know what, we're probably not going to say something very good about it, so we're not going to cover it. So I say with aBlogtoWatch, what should be the most interesting to people is what we don't cover, right? Because we definitely share our opinion a lot, but if we really hate something, we're just like, you know what, no one really needs to know about it. And so I think that's a very telling thing. And then the third type of relationship we might have with a watch company is on a management level. I have a lot of relationships with managers and CEOs and owners and things like that. And sometimes it's a friendship. Sometimes, I talk to them about ideas and things like that. But I'm really trying to influence the direction of the brand. I've gotten in trouble for doing this a lot, and the brands sometimes apologize and sometimes say you were right about things. This happened this week. But this is me as an activist. This is me trying to be in the shoes of you as the consumer and say, hey, CEO, how could I help you make your company better for the enthusiast, make better products, market more effectively? So I really try to sit in the shoes of the consumer and do my best to shift the direction of the brand. And I've done a lot of that behind the years. Maybe I don't get a lot of credit for it, but that is I hope that explains sort of the various types of ways we have relationships with the watch brands.
Definitely. So actually, I very well understood the first and the third relationship you explained. I do have one small question about the second relationship that you explained. So
Sure.
I understand how there is a symbiotic relationship between the brands that you like or support you, and how your opinion should ideally, or not ideally, but you would tend to also give a good opinion about them. And so, like you said, that if you're staying away from a brand or if you're staying away from a particular product, then that should stay a lot about that product, and we don't really need to say anything. But my question is that don't you think it is better to say something bad about a product in so many words, maybe not explicitly, but say something bad about the product and maybe give good criticism, constructive criticism, give proper recommendations as to how they could improve, and then put that out there, and also keep the brand in the loop about the same thing. That way, probably there'd be no sour relationships, and the consumer as well as the brand would still get a very, very balanced view from somebody who is very experienced in the industry from both perspectives.
Let me try to answer this way, and it's a very good question. So there's certain types of products that we just don't like. There's no fixing it. There's no advice we can give other than, you know what, don't make that anymore. There's other products that have like a flaw. We like it otherwise, but maybe the brand did something sort of wrong with it. And in the second instance, that's when we'll write about it and say something about it. In the first instance, we have to ask ourselves, there's only so many days in the year, there's only so many hours, we can't cover every single watch. So we have to curate the selection that we do for the things that we think are the most important. I guess I could say it this way. The watches we don't cover, we just think aren't relevant for what consumers should be focused on right now. But I'll give you a perfect example of the second situation. I'm reviewing a watch, and it's a very expensive watch. Well, not that expensive, about $7,000 watch. And it comes with a few different straps because it's got this interchangeable strap thing. And it has a leather strap and a rubber strap. But the company doesn't have a little buckle, you know, the pin buckle for both the leather strap and the rubber strap. They want you to move this little steel part from one to the other, and you could scratch it, and it's annoying. I'm like, for a $7,000 watch, you should include both. That's information that I'll talk about. I'm happy to say that because it's a flaw that can be fixed. It doesn't make the product not relevant, but it's the type of feedback that needs to be said.
Cool. So feedback, criticism. I mean, like you said, that the media houses will be biased to a certain extent, or maybe friends. And the point which Ahan was trying to make was, I think, we as enthusiasts or we as consumers want to see also the dark side of it. I think there's a question also out there saying the wrong side or the bad side of the watches or a particular watch. We've seen a few cases like that, which have been snowballed, which have been, there was a New York edition of a particular watch manufacturer, which was which was snowballed into something really pathetic.
Talking about the Panerai?
Yeah, I'm talking about the Panerai. So, which snowballed into something really bad, right? I mean, and after that, the brand had some taints, which they need to wash. Obviously, I mean, they didn't do a very great job at that. We still talk about that Panerai and then we laugh about it. But yes, there is still a gap in terms of honesty. But like you said, that a media house as such may not be able to fill that gap, and that is where we spoke about the point of individual journalists or individual reviewers, wherein they come and they slam a particular watch if they don't like it. But again, that's just an opinion, so it's not a fact, it's just opinionated. And if you kind of trust that person or trust that channel, and if it has some 100,000 200,000 followers, you might just start trusting that channel because of the number. But again, it's just an opinion.
Let me tell you something funny. I'll tell you something funny. So I don't know how many years of a collecting you have to do before this happens, but at some point, the relationship with the watch community becomes more important to a collector than buying new watches. And when that happens, they like gossip, they like sensationalism. And when they read watch media, they're like, I want to know more than just the new watches and things like that. I want to start having some gossip, and I want to see some like crazy things happen. I want to see scandals. And then people that are newer to the hobby, when they see things like that, they're confused. They're like, I'm just here to buy the product. I'm just excited about it. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to buy everything, but like, I want you to help me buy a product. I don't want to hear about industry scandals. So it's sort of very interesting that this sort of like one side of the demographic, the consumer demographic, like really cares about the scandalous stuff, and the other side doesn't want to see it at all. So you sort of have to mix the two, especially if you're in a aBlogtoWatch and you're also trying to attract people new into the hobby. And it's difficult at times to have content which really appeals to novices and to people that are sort of the very seasoned veteran collectors, that includes myself.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, and I think the basic idea here that we all are discussing, or we all are here on the platform, is it's a hobby. I mean, come on, it's a passion. Let's look at it that way. There's a point about investment. It's not an investment for sure. I think you agree with that on multiple levels, that watches are not really great investments.
If you're not losing money in your hobby, it's not really a hobby.
Exactly, right? So let's keep it to that. I mean, in terms of reviews, content, media, as a consumer, I think we have all these, different channels of media, different channels of information for us. Pick and choose what you like. At the end of the day, it's your hobby, so there's no right or wrong, right? I mean, if you like a watch with your eyes, you like it. It might not be a 90-year-old reference or something like that. It doesn't matter. If you don't like it, you don't like it, right?
Look, let me say this. I'm very sensitive to people that from their home and on their computers and phones are seeing all these media characters. They haven't had my experience where I've been in the same room as a lot of them. I know a lot of the backstories. A lot of these guys are, if they were in another job, you'd call them sort of like a con artist. They delight in using people's insecurity against them. They sort of get a kick out of having rich people squeal and dangle something in front of them that they can't buy. there's a lot of this sort of sadistic behavior that happens, and a lot of it helps drive a lot of money because insecurity gets people to spend a lot. And so what you've had over the last several years, because the traditional watch brands haven't been spending enough money on advertising, you've had like all these other types of entities and things like that permeate and get a lot more share of voice. And again, if you ask yourself what has happened since they had more share of voice, I think everyone's just become more insecure. Oh, I don't have the popular watch. Is my watch increasing in value? Was I able to get on that wait list? Nobody was asking these questions before auction houses and others, I just keep using that because it's a good example, have been trying to sort of propagandize that these are things that we should be thinking about. For me, they have polluted the hobby. They have not added to it. So I think there needs to be an active culling of this mentality, and we need to go back to a more purist form of collecting, buying, enjoying. This is a luxury hobby. You have to have spent money on all your other bills and taking care of your family, and then and only then can you spend a little bit of money on yourself to buy watches from time to time. If that doesn't represent your economic situation, and of course you should always buy what you can afford. If you can only spend $300 on a watch, no problem, just don't spend $5,000. But when you get into the game to make money or to bet on future demand, you're not really buying watches. You're trading in equities, and that's something totally different.
Yeah, for sure. And I think somewhere India wasn't that. If I would say, if you see the generation before us, or maybe a few years back, India wasn't always about investing into watches or investing into a particular watch or a particular steel reference, sports steel reference or something like that. But I think to a certain extent, the globalization, the online media, now that is when the online media comes into the picture. So then you had mature markets like the US, and which is little different from the Europe, and then you had China. All three very, very unique markets as such, in my opinion. India was never on the map as such. Still, we are very small in terms of our consumer demand for the watches, and we never looked at watches like that. For us, watches was more like a gift. If someone's getting married or someone's getting a promotion, that's where it ends. That's it. Or maybe if someone had say $10,000 worth of Indian money, and he said, I want to buy a good watch this time, so he just goes to any of these big showrooms and just picks up a watch without waiting in line or all of that bullshit. But because of the media, right, we all are on the same, we are getting to that level where a lot of enthusiasts which we come across now are like, what, will the price increase? What do you think of this as an investment? Or if I have, say, 500,000 rupees, should I put it in A watch or a B watch? But so when you tell them that whatever you like, man, it's all good. So say, no, but I like both of them. Which one is LE or limited edition, which might appreciate later? Where is that thought come from? This thought is coming from a lot of auction houses or a lot of media.
I want to chime in here for a second because this thought came to mind when you were saying this, and I actually never really realized it before. But I think this is sort of profound. You put a lot of watch collectors in the same room, and they know they have something in common, and there's a good chance they'll be friends. But when it comes to watch conversation, other than show me what's on your wrist and let me tell you what I like, there's not that much to talk about, because at the end of the day, it's a very personal journey. What you really want is to be exposed to more things. You're not really interested in the other person's opinion about stuff. You'd like to learn about new things, but it's very much a personal journey. And so I think the challenge is really that when watch collectors hang out, there's not enough topics that don't lead to some of these problematic, questions and answers like, did I spend too much? Or should I buy this? The reality is you should never ask anyone whether or not you should buy something. And if you do, you should take it with the most sparing grain of salt. It's a personal decision you need to make. What I've started to do with my friends, and I get together and we're watch lovers, other than just sort of like glancing at what each other has and passing it around so we can examine each other's watches, we talk about everything else. We might talk about a little gossip or something like this, but we actually don't debate what's a better watch, this and that. There's always gonna be someone that wears something you don't like or you don't value, and that's fine. If that person wears it, makes it happy, let him do it. So I think what needs to change is not the questions, but the conversations that watch collectors are having, and they should ask themselves, what are we really trying to get out of this? We're friends, we want to be friends, but maybe these questions are not friendly questions. So maybe that's what needs to change.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Actually, just a last point before we get into the last section where we ask you a lot of your opinions, and then we can go to the Q&A. So we were just having a conversation internally in the Red Bar chapter, and I was speaking to someone, and I think the idea behind the community, or what it should be according to us, is that we are a couple of friends who met for a beer, and then we happen to talk about watches. What we like. I mean, that is like the common liking which we have. You might be a doctor, or you might be a lawyer, and I might be an engineer, but we all are working in different, stratas of society, and everywhere in terms of location. Also now because of COVID, I mean, that's all right. We can be virtually connected. We just meet up, just to have a beer, and we happen to talk about watches. And like you said, it doesn't really matter because you might not like. I might not like your watch, and vice versa, right? But it doesn't matter. It's a very personal choice out there. So getting into that, I think Ahan has prepared some rapid fire kind of questions wherein he might not give you too
Let's
much
hear
time
it.
to think, and your honest opinion is what will come out. So shoot.
Okay. Hi. So I have a few questions, and I'll just tell you like what the basis of it is, and also what I am expecting that the answer is. So firstly, I just want to tell you that I admire you a lot, and I've always admired you ever since I started watch collecting. And
Thank
so I
you. That's
used to
very
read
kind
up
of
a
you.
lot about you. And there was this one time I read something where you said, as an adult, my ambition now is to be as childlike as possible. And so this is where the question originates from. So for me, a very important aspect of being childlike is curiosity, just plain simple curiosity and nothing else. So when I was starting out, there weren't many platforms or websites or media houses or whatever you name it, just anything under the sun, where it was a one-stop shop for a budding enthusiast to learn all you can about watches, or at least enough to delve deeper into the rabbit hole. You just had to collect and extrapolate from incomplete data. So my question to you, and sorry for such a long question, but my question to you is, any top five picks, and even if you can't name five, it's fine, but any top five picks of any platforms or sites or watch houses or anything like that, which you think would be amazing for a budding collector, someone
Okay,
who
I
thinks.
thought this was a question about acting like a child. Then I realized it's a different question. Um, Look, I learned a lot about watches early on, spending an awful lot of time on eBay. And I really liked eBay because not only do they have a bunch of stuff on there, but like the product, the description pages had tech specs. And at the time, you couldn't find tech specs anywhere. So you could actually use eBay to like learn about tech specs, which again, today it's a little bit different. So I think eBay is still a really great tool, but just for browsing purposes, it's probably the most robust thing. Look, aBlogtoWatch, we're nearing the point where we will have published 10,000 articles. And that's like a lot of watches to look through. So we have some tools on the site right now that allow you to sort of just like go back in time and see some stuff kind of randomly, like on the if you visit the website and look at an article page, there's a new sidebar that has some of that stuff that help people delve into new content. You're sure to learn new stuff there. Unfortunately on the internet, it's actually limiting because, in the real world, like when I used to go to Hong Kong and you walk around there, you look in windows and you see new stuff. What I challenge everyone to do is to buy a watch without ever reading a review. Just buy based upon tech specs and your own comfort level, preferably from a brand you've never heard of. Do something silly like that. Like when I was starting out, there wasn't that many reviews. And so that was the common behavior. You had to buy stuff, you had to make mistakes, and you would learn. And a lot of the times you would actually discover things that were better than expected. I think that like when it comes to reviews, the fallacy is you only want to buy something which has 5 stars. Now we don't rate things that way, but the idea is that you can't buy everything. So why not buy the things that are the best reviewed? But in reality, they're so subjective. And so I think that's a great exercise once in a while. Just buy a random watch without really putting too much thought into it.
Very interesting. Thank you. I have another question, which comes from one comment that you made during this session itself. So you said that, lots of times brands tend to embellish their history a lot, and it's tough to find just pure, plain, simple history as it actually happened. So again, top 5 platforms, sites, forums, anything like that, where people who are really wanting to delve deep into history of either a brand or a product or a particular concept or a particular variant. So top 5 picks for that.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to preface that by saying that my inability to get accurate histories has just made me not really care about history. I care, like, is the watch really well made today? And does it represent certain historical things well? If the brand has or doesn't have real history, I don't really care as much as if they have a good present. And that's been my adaptation to this problem. Most of the good watch history is written in French and has not been translated in any other language. There's some which is in German, but for the most part, very little actual watch history was originally written in English. And so to get it, translated to English or even another language outside of French or one of those other languages in Europe is going to be rare. And so a lot of it is actually just printed in Switzerland in these libraries. You have to go there and read it. And I haven't done that, but I've talked to these historians who have explained, like, this is really some of the only ways to get the history, because the brands do that and they just sort of pick and choose. And I think one of the best examples was in Jean-Claude Biver was reviving Blancpain, and he needed the face of who Blancpain was, and he just chose a random picture. It wasn't. It was just a face. He said, that looks good. That looks like a good face, and that worked, and no one really said too much about it. So that's the type of thing that can happen. Publications from Switzerland, there aren't that many of them, like Europa Star, which has been around for a long time. They recently put their archives. It's a subscription thing, but they have, like, going back 50 years in English, not just English, of course, a lot of French, but articles about the watch industry that have a lot of truth in them. There was a publication called Watch Around. These were not watch review publications. They were not really ever trying to do that, but they were very much talking about the industry. And so I'd say that, I don't know Watch Around if you can go archives, but I know Europa Star. I mean, you'd have to be really dedicated and spend some time and hunt and search, but that's one of the only ways I know to do it.
That's very interesting. I have a lot to catch up on now after this
Yeah.
session. Thank you so much.
Spend 6 years in Switzerland going to libraries, and you'll be caught up a little bit.
No, but this is very, very nice. These two I had no idea about, so this is very helpful. Thank you. And okay, my last question now, and then we move on to the audience questions. So my last question is top 5 suggestions again for budget watches, budget picks, and I know yours is one of them. So you can't name your site because yours is one of the best for budget picks. But other than that, any other site for top 5 budget picks?
Oh, we say watches or websites?
No, any top 5, any websites or platforms or forums where you can learn about budget alternatives to watches, where you can.
Well, honestly,
500.
my favorite place that I would recommend, and again, it's not a one-stop shop, but go to Reddit. The Reddit, the subreddit for watches there is primarily people interested in products under $1,000, maybe sometimes a little bit over. I think their sweet spot is a few $100. There's a lot of weirdness out there for sure, but like if you just want to be an emerging watch lover and just get some other people that like the same thing, the subreddit on watches is a great place to start. And of course, again, eBay, you just search by price.
Okay, thank you so much.
Cool, cool, Anand. Thanks a lot. I mean, that was a lot of good information. We might probably collate it later and share it with the crew, so we all know where to go and what to find. So, not taking more time, I think let's get into the questions. We have some people from the Indian media out here, which I want to first pick on, and then we can go to the audience. I think we have Karishma Karer. She's one of the founders of the Hour Markers. It's a newly launched Indian media house. I think one of the very few
Cool.
media houses. So she's here. So Karishma, hi, how are you? And please share some insights about the Indian part of the watch media and what do you think? How is it going? Where are we taking this? What is happening?
Hi, everyone. Hey, Ariel. It was very interesting to hear all your insights. Honestly, the Indian platform is pretty much the same as the global platform in terms of a media house, so to say. I've started an online presence since a year, 2 years, Puneet, but my family's been in the business of publishing magazines on watches for over 70 years. So coming from there, and I completely agree with what you said, Ariel. I mean, when I also joined the business back in 2003, I was very skeptical on voicing my opinion about certain watches because, you don't want to hamper your relationship, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, a lot of the media back then was advertisement driven. You do need your bread and butter at the end of the day. I think what has changed now with social media is the fact that a lot of us have a voice, we have an opinion. But that's a very thin line. I still strongly believe that you have to have some offline credibility to have a strong online presence, which sort of differentiates media houses and people who sort of know more about watches, or like you just said about the history, I completely agree on that front as well. But at least even knowing the watches, touching, feeling, understanding how the industry works in comparison to just walking into a store, taking a couple of pictures on Instagram and posting it. So I feel that really sort of takes away in terms of influencing people, which is a word I don't really like a lot. But I think media houses are very, we have to be careful about how we project certain watches. But at the end of the day, it's an opinion. We're going to give you the facts and we're going to give you what we feel. But it's very, very personal. It's an opinion at the end of the day. And in terms of Indian media houses, there is really no difference. There are very few relevant and ones that I would also refer to. But yeah, I mean, that's my take on it.
Thank you. That was interesting.
Interesting. So we also have Amish Bell from Winding Ritual. So Amish, what do you think about the Indian audience right now? I mean, in terms of readability, I mean, you also have your really nice website, which is Winding Ritual, Ariel. So it's also, I don't know if it's a media house or a blogging website, but his articles are amazing to read. And it's pretty interesting. I mean, I read them all the time. So Amish, what is your take on the Indian audience right now?
Thanks, Puneet. And hi, Ariel. Thank you so much for taking the time at this hour. So Puneet, I think one thing that's kind of been very interesting over the last couple of years, aided by Instagram and Watch Media, has been this whole thing around reading more and learning more about what you're purchasing. So we have seen, for example, by virtue of the entrance of brands like Oris and Nomos into the Indian market, that Indians are looking at kind of a deeper sense of history, a deeper sense of value, a deeper sense of like detail, about what they're purchasing, which wasn't the case earlier. We had a very restricted sense of brands that were of preference, which largely revolved around Rolex, Omega, Longines. Whereas over the last couple of years, we've seen these new brands come in. We've seen kind of more interest. We've seen things like like a RedBar chapter in the country, for example. So kind of obviously there's been kind of increasing interest. Like last year I went ahead and did the FHH watch expert curriculum, etc. So like I think a lot of us just together are just doing more to bring more knowledge, perhaps a little more locally, what Ariel has been doing, for so many years. So I think that evolution definitely has been, something we've seen very, very clearly in terms of discernment, in terms of taste, in terms of being open to new things. But I will also add, and I'll kind of have a segue into a question for Ariel after this, that in the last, say year or two, this whole thing around, investment and, obsession over a particular brand or two particular brands has really kind of infected the hobby, so to speak. And I know that Ariel, often writes coming in from also like an anthropological standpoint, behavioral standpoint. And he did mention earlier that, we do need to do something to go back to this purest kind of way of, thinking, collecting about watches. So kind of, I just wanted to kind of ask you, Ariel, that do you have any predictions or thoughts about how this can be achieved? Because I mean, of course, a lot of us who are like just genuinely passionate and couldn't care less about value and investment, we do want to see it return to where it was. I mean, I remember collecting watches when there was no Instagram, and I'd love to go back to that time. And it's something we all kind of think about a lot, but do you really see that happening? And if yes, what is it that some of us in the media, for instance, can do, or what do the watch brands need to do? So in this whole ecosystem, what needs to happen for it to kind of go back to that purest way of collecting that you mentioned?
Thank you very much for bringing that up, and I appreciate your comments. It's an excellent question and one that we should all be asking ourselves. We're not quite there yet, but there's a direction that we can move in, and it really hinges on the ability to separate watch collecting from the industry that sells watches. Because right now, watch media has had to align itself, not all watch media, but a lot of watch media has had to align itself with commercial interests. And when you have this intertangling between the desire to have a fun community and a commercial interest, this is what starts to happen. So it's really about watch media attracting these sort of like investor types and these speculators to the same clubs. And all of a sudden, watch collectors are like, what are these guys doing here? What they're talking about isn't what we were talking about a few months ago. And so I think that it's sort of these two communities coalescing when they really should be spread apart. Now here's what we should do about it. It really hinges on the ability for watch collectors to make a collected decision that they want to support watch media. There's a very good chance that a couple of years from now, quality watch media will remain quality watch media because they're funded by some type of subscription or some type of ability to monetize the audience. Now, it's not that they have to do this because advertising is not an option. Advertising will always be an option, but the media who is able to be supported by the audience then actually works for the audience. And when you work for the audience, every interest you have is into making the audience happy, bring them great experiences, and give them what they want. And what they want is, like what you said, a real enthusiast collector community to support a hobby that we all have a shared interest. And you don't have this infection of this, you should buy this or you should feel insecure if you don't. And that's really what we want to stay away, not to be pushed into buying anything that we don't want, just to feel comfortable being into the hobby, excuse me, and recognizing that once we're a collector, what are we gonna do? We're probably gonna buy stuff. Don't tell us what to buy. As long as we're happy being a collector, we're just gonna buy what we like. And that's what everyone should feel comfortable with. So the question that we as media should be asking ourselves is, what new technologies or strategies can we experiment with to see how comfortably we can work with the audiences to pay for our services, to be subscribers or supporters or however it is. But we have to ask ourselves, if the future is going to be watch media supported by the audience, what do those business models look like? How can we experiment with them? And how can we have conversations with the audiences to ask them, what are you guys and gals actually willing to pay for? Tell us and we'll try to build it for you. So that's what I think sort of the future holds. And there's, again, a lot of experimentation, and it goes across all media. It's not just watch media. All media right now that's for enthusiasts is asking themselves the same question. It's clearly a lot of people want to read about us, but the brands that we talk about get so spooked all the time and don't seem to have enough money to begin with. What do we do about that? And so it's sort of this interesting question about coming up with a new business model.
Interesting. Thanks. Sorry, Amish, you want to go?
Thanks. Yeah, just like a quick follow-up. So Ariel, like, have you been able to experiment with this kind of like reader-supported model? Because in a certain sense, if you look at how things are right now, like one, of course, is people's unwillingness to pay for content online. And the second thing is that primarily for watch media and publications, the brands are the customer. I mean, just if you look at customers in terms of who's paying your bills, the brands are the customer. So then to have like reader engagement, but then have the brands as your customer, like kind of how do you really walk that path? Because like you said, the problem is that while we do need to go towards a place of reader-supported journalism, behaviorally, we're not seeing that happen or meaningfully grow over the last couple of years. I mean, you have like Substacks and all of these things come up, but it's not happening at scale where something, say, of the scale of aBlogtoWatch can really meaningfully transition at this stage in time from brand supported to reader supported. So kind of what are your thoughts on that balancing act?
Sure. I've thought about this probably more than you might think. I've spent over a decade thinking about this. I even years ago, I wrote an extremely long letter to Apple, and it basically said this: you guys have this big system called iTunes, and you have everyone's credit card information, and people perform microtransactions on there. Why don't you develop a tool for website publishers to be able to sell their content in small bits and chunks using their iTunes account? And I know they looked at it and they probably thought about it and maybe still thinking about it. But what I'm getting at is that the answer isn't everyone spending, $9.99 a month on their favorite watch media. It's spending 5 cents, 10 cents, 25 cents on one article. There's a watch you're interested in reading a review about. It costs you 25 cents to read that, and you know that someone really put their time around it. I think that you're willing to spend that. So I believe that the future is in microtransactions to purchase online content in bits and pieces. And then only if you really want to be part of that community do you spend money on a subscription. I also think that it's not about spending money on content. It will be for some. But right now, the consumer still has a perception that content should be free. So there's other things that you can sell: merchandise, community, different types of advice, different types of services. I think that that's where a lot of the experimentation has to come with. So we have, like on aBlogtoWatch right now, there is a system we designed. I can just turn the key and turn on a system where we can charge a subscription. We have a name for it. We already have a list of things that we think we can include in there. But the reason that I haven't turned it on quite yet is I still want to tweak some things. I still want to experiment. I still want a focus group. But I'll tell you, it's not about putting our content behind a paywall. That's not really what it's about. It's about offering something else that I think people want. In fact, a few things. And so it's something I'm actively working on. So I don't have all the answers right now, but I can tell you I'm working on it. And if anybody else is working on it that wants to work on it together, I'm very open-minded. I love collaboration. For me, this is a communal thing. This is not an industry of companies that live in silos. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that these watch brands do, is they like to pretend that they're a silo, that the house of Patek Philippe, we do everything, we don't need anyone. That's completely wrong. Watch brands are part of a community of manufacturers in Switzerland. If it wasn't for a community, none of these watches would be made to begin with.
Oh, wow. So content is going to get expensive for us, huh?
I don't think so. I really don't. I think that a lot of the content is going to stay without cost. I think that there's going to be other things that people are going to buy. And again, it's like most models. If 90% of the people do it for free and 10% help monetize, that's going to be enough. I mean, you have this amazing, I guess, a completely different thing, but in the video game world, like something like Fortnite, which has one of the most fascinating business models of anything out there right now, and its whole thing is for free. But if you want to have more status in the community or have more fun playing with your friends, you pay something, and it might look weird on the outside, but they're making billions of dollars, and it's the top grossing video game, right now. And so I think there needs to be a lot more open-mindedness, which is hard in the watch industry, which is so traditionalist. So it's true. You have to have this appreciation for the strict creation of a watch in the traditional way, but be super open-minded to new media. I get not everyone can do that, but as long as there's enough of both kinds of personalities, it'll get there.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, to what Amish said, I'll just add something. So first of all, thank you, Karishma and Amish, for coming forward and taking this up. It was interesting to hear the Indian side of media, also how are things happening out there. But just to add from a consumer's angle, I mean, we are per se the consumers, we are the commodity. So from that angle, Amish, if I can just kind of pseudo answer your question, is that for us, trust is the biggest factor, right? Credibility. So charging, not charging, brands, all that is your business. That's the media house's business model. But for us, what comes first is the credibility part of it. And once that is, I think, engaged, and that's all guns, right? I mean, one of the largest, I mean, all media houses for that matter, globally, even aBlogtoWatch out here, we have certain level of credibility, and we would want to see that in the Indian media also. I would go ahead and say that, we are a billion people, and we should also, I'm not saying not trust the global media, but also be trusting the Indian media, because you guys are made from us. I mean, you guys are living our lives. I mean, Ariel out here knows about watches, but he doesn't know about Indian mentality around watches, right? I mean,
only a little bit.
A little bit. So, and in terms of how does that happen? What do we think while buying a watch? Because, earlier I said watches were a gift, etc. Then it's going into the investment transition phase. We have an entire big concept of jewelry in the Indian society, which is not there so strongly in the Western countries. So I think if you guys from the Indian media start catering to those points, you will get more readership, you will get more viewership and trust and credibility. Because at the end of the day, if you want to kind of review a particular watch or give us a press release of a particular watch, which is, there are 1,000 or million other websites which are giving us the same information from the global angle also. So I think the flavor of India, and which I've seen, I mean, to be very honest, in both of these platforms right now, there's a lot of Indian flavor happening, which is interesting. And the new platforms, so we are, as enthusiasts, we're actually looking forward to reading much more of your content and interacting with you on a community level. And probably that might answer your question too, right?
Let me add in here, and again, I don't know the Indian market because I wasn't raised in India, but I'm very open with the fact that I was raised in Los Angeles at a certain time in history, and I was influenced by certain pop culture, and I like certain things, and certain watches remind me of things I grew up with, and I'm just open with it. And I recognize that by no means includes everyone. So what I recommend to everyone out there writing about watches, talk about your own culture, your own upbringing. Like he was talking about, the local Indian flavor. India is a big place, so you can't speak for everyone, but speak about you. Just speak about you. As long as you do that, I think you're doing your job.
Perfect. Cool. So just moving on quickly, we have some questions from the RedBar chapters also. So I think Adeep, you were pinging me for a question. Shoot, what question you have?
Hey, Ariel, how are you doing? Yeah, I hope I can frame this properly. But in the past 3 or 4 years, there's been an explosion of micro brands out there, and obviously they're primarily marketed through influencers on YouTube and Instagram and stuff. And so, what's the relationship that traditional media would have? Traditional watch media would have with micro brands, and obviously some of them are really successful, and they do make genuinely good product as well. So just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
So the way that I view these sort of micro brands or startups or enthusiast driven brands, as I like to call them, there's different names, as sort of an evolutionary bloom for a period of time, and it will not be forever, and it's basically already started to end. With not a lot of money, you can essentially get your watches made. You can have a design, and you can go out to manufacture, and they're all over the place in Asia, in Switzerland, and get your watch product made for a relatively low amount of money that historically you could never do, and in the future will also be challenging to do. And so what that's allowed for is a lot of people with just slightly different ideas or completely wacky ideas to get product out to market. Some of it will stick, most of it will not. So as a collector who's interested by new things, I love this because I get to see design experimentation on a level that we'll never see before. Looking back on this period, maybe 15 or 20 years from now, there'll be this sort of golden age of these little startup brands, and they'll just be like, oh, there's so many of them. We saw a little bit of this in sort of the 1960s and 70s, and this was sort of when the main watch brands were starting to succumb to the quartz crisis. So what happened? All the suppliers and manufacturers started opening up these new little brands that were trying to get in there. So this is actually the second wave of sort of micro brands actually starting, which is now, and again, it's a period of time that will end. So as a consumer, it's fun, it's cheap. You get to support someone who comes at it from a genuine enthusiasm for watches. It's usually not a business person. The business people are the ones that are like, cut out the middleman. Here's my $300 watch or my $100 watch, which is a luxury watch. And you're like, no, it's not. And it's not. But the people that are having really the effort to try to make their dream watch, the watch they want to have, you gotta love these people. And they come from so many different backgrounds. Most of the stuff sucks, but once in a while, you have something really cool. On aBlogtoWatch, we really like to support these guys because once in a while, there are those small brands that make it, and they make their second and third and fourth round of watches, and they become successful. And we like to cover them because they're cool. But a lot of the times, they make a few products, and that's that. It's just not working out for them. Sometimes they still end up making great watches, and you can get those watches on the secondary market, and you love them, but they just weren't able to make a business model out of it. So intellectually, I love seeing all this. But if you're a more conservative collector, yeah, you might want to hold off and just buy from the traditional brands.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, guys?
Yeah. Hi. If I can jump in. Hi, Ariel. I'm Ricardo. Hi. I'm also, I would say, a watch blogger in a way, not of course on the same in the same dimension that you guys are. I have just over 20,000 followers on my IG account. but I'm still at the stage where I'm trying to decide if I want to do this as kind of a career or just keep it as a hobby. So my question, I guess, would be, when was the moment when you decided that watch blogging could be your career? And in general, what kind of advice, apart from what we just discussed, would you give to bloggers who see that they might have a future in the industry, but are still not there yet? Thank you.
It's a very good question. And I have the fortune to look back and say, when I started it, I was conveniently naive and didn't really know what I was getting into. And if you talk to a lot of successful entrepreneurs and you ask them about that time where they were just starting out, they too didn't know what they were getting into. I did not know a lot about the landscape. What I knew is that my site was getting more and more popular, that I had people coming to me wanting to advertise, and that the prospects of working for myself and controlling my own life as a young professional sounded really, really great. As Vridi said in the beginning, I was the very first person to become a full-time watch blogger in terms of supporting myself over it. I quit my job as a lawyer, so I guess I had enough background to sort of handle myself in a business context, at least not, get into too much trouble, and I haven't, which is great. But I don't know that I could do it again. I don't know that I could repeat what I did then today. Of course, there was less competition out there. The media environment was very different. You could, it's like when Instagram was just starting. You could get a pretty big following really, really early on. Now, if you don't sort of pay to play, it's really, really tough to grow an account. So if you look at someone that has a big Instagram account from a few years ago and say, I'd like to do that, you can't copy their model and do it now. So I think that getting into watch media is for the brave and for the bold and for the people that really like watches. And as is the case in any type of creative industry, there's going to be an 80% loss rate and a 20% success rate. And the 20% that succeeds is going to succeed because it does something in an interesting way or a novel way. I'd say that what I see the most need of right now in the watch space is having what I call niche voices. Not media that tries to speak to everyone, but media that tries to speak to people that don't feel as though they're being spoken to by the other watch media. I try to cast as big a net as possible, but I don't appeal to everyone. Maybe I'm too nerdy for some. Maybe I'm not down to earth for some. I mean, maybe it's just cultural differences. I don't claim to be able to make everyone happy, and I certainly don't try. So I think that the question is asked is, who do you speak to that is most receptive? And if you have a good rapport with them and you generally enjoy it, pursue it. But don't try to do what other people have done. Not only do you not really know what they did, but you probably won't be able to replicate it even if you tried.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was very insightful. Thank you.
Super. Any more questions?
Come on, guys. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah,
hi, how are you?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for being with her, with us at this hour. You're quite a trooper, I must say. Thank you. And there were guys on the East Coast who said I can't join, and I told them, hey, if Ariel can join at 2 a.m., I think you can too. But you are one of the people who are responsible for me going crazy over this hobby. So thank you for that. It started, with the ESQ watch in a mall somewhere in Chicago, and then there's no end to it after that.
It always starts in a mall, right? Always starts in a mall.
Right. Yeah. So my question to you is not so much about the media aspect. I think we've discussed that quite a bit today. It's more about Ariel as a collector. Okay. And so in your opinion, okay, what would be the one or two brands that would bring the best value, to a collector? Okay, value. I don't mean to speak only on the price. I think price is a part of it. Okay, but the watchmakers, okay, the process, the atelier, all right, the history, and of course the present. So if you were to put all of that together, in your opinion, as a collector, maybe one or two, would you share with us, please?
I'm going to describe types of brands. I find it very limiting to have to narrow it down to a few watch brand options because a lot of it comes in personal taste. I mean, I might mention a brand that has great values, but you just don't like the watch, and then it doesn't do any good. what I would say is this. If you want to be a very sort of safe collector to begin with, what you do is you buy from brands that are run by engineers and watchmakers. If they're run by business people or accountants or anything like that, they probably don't make something that you want. Find brands that are run by people that themselves design and make watches, because they're probably making watches for themselves. And one of the things that brands that are run by people like this have in common is they usually don't charge too much, because they ask themselves, what would I want to pay? And they usually don't answer, so high. So the prices that they're charging tend to be much more reasonable. It's cost and a little bit of margin, because again, they're putting themselves in the shoes of the consumer. So do you need to do a little bit of research about the brand and maybe, hear the CEO talk and things like that? Yeah. But again, if you're trying to narrow it down to just a few brands, doing, homework like that can save you a lot of time.
Okay. Any of your favorites you'd like to share today?
Look, I think that I like tool watch brands that are also run by them. And again, this Marathon, this is a tool watch brand. They supply to the military. The German watch brands, Zinn and ones like that are great tool watch brands. Pretty much all the Japanese watches are good tool watches. Your G-Shock is an excellent tool watch. Your Seiko Diver is a great tool watch. You look at all the watches that are really collected, the Rolex Submariners out there. What are they? They're just good tool watches. And so at the end of the day, good tool watches that at least have that mentality are the ones that are sort of the most consistently endearing to collectors. And so I think you should sort of strive for tool watches. You could sort of branch out after that, but it's a good, safe place to stay.
Thank you.
Puneet, I'm going to jump in with another quick question. Ariel, there was a question about micro brands earlier, and I know that you've kind of been through your share of really pretty much having seen them all. And I know that you recently also got the chance, to spend time with the Bangalore Watch Company's Cricket Watch, and you've kind of spent time with their earlier releases as well. So kind of seeing that Indian micro brand and also having a point of reference of having kind of basically seen everything that's out there as an Indian watch brand, what is it that you'd like to tell them in terms of what they do well and what they could do better in the future?
Yeah, so Nirupesh and his family are really great, because I think they combine sort of this global marketing sort of expertise with a real desire to make a watch in India that celebrates Indian culture and tastes. And so what I like to see are watches that like I said, are really about combining what makes a good watch with those local flavors and things like that. India is a massive market, so many different languages, so many different places, so much history, so many interesting things going on. What I don't like to see, and I think that in other parts of Asia, like in China, is more guilty of this, but making a brand that's just in China, but that looks like it was from Europe, with sort of a faux European name, very sort of popular type of practice that happened there. I don't think that the Indian consumer wants this. I think the Indian consumer is very proud and wants to see good watches that are not tacky, that are well done, that sort of respect traditional watchmaking rules and design and proportions, but that feel like they are being influenced by things that you would grow up with if you grew up in various parts of India. So again, I want to celebrate Indian culture through the watches, and a little bit through the Bangalore Watch Company. You can do that. Of course, I knew that cricket was a big deal in India, but if I didn't, that watch could have taught me that. I like learning something about a place that I don't know a lot about through a watch. I learned a lot about Europe through watches. I'd like to feel the same thing about watches coming from India.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. First of all, Ariel, thanks for this great session. It was very interesting. My question to you is, you've in the past mentioned that a watch to blog wouldn't go the direction of Hodinkee, but you also mentioned that trying out e-commerce or like the platform to sell other things might be the next big shift. So what kind of did something change your perception?
Thank you for the question. I'm very specific sometimes in my answers, so sometimes it's easy to misinterpret what I'm saying, and I'm sure it happens all the time. So aBlogtoWatch will fundamentally stop being watch media if we start to sell watches. My belief is that if you are a store that sells watches, aBlogtoWatch is a great place to advertise and tell people, hey, we've got watches, and watch stores come and go, and the brands they carry come and go. But as long as aBlogtoWatch retains its ability to have a good relationship with the audience by being neutral, and when neutrality comes in, it's not about the review, it's about neutral of where you buy a watch. That's where we're really neutral. I don't care where you buy a watch. Yes, there's some advertisers we have, but at the end of the day, as long as you get a good watch, I don't care where you buy it. But there's a lot more watch media that is not neutral about where you buy, especially if they sell watches themselves. When watch media no longer becomes neutral about where you buy a watch, they're going to be incentivized to only push you to things that they have. They no longer become media. So the question is, if we want to remain media, how do we do that? By selling things, and it's not watches. That's the answer. We can sell things around watches. You know, the store we have, I call it a gift store for watch lovers. The idea is, what do you get the watch lover in your life? If you're a watch lover and you want to celebrate that you're a watch lover with something other than a watch, with apparel or art or other things that we'll be coming out with, that's the way to do that. That doesn't compete with any of the entities that we want advertising on our platform. We want watch retailers and watch brands to feel comfortable advertising on our platform, not thinking that our platform is their competition. That's what we're really trying to avoid.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Who's going next?
Hi, I have a question.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. So I just wanted to know that how often do brands or watch companies actually approach, say, a media house or bloggers or you know or people who have YouTube channels, basically to get you know, market feedback before they get into designing a new watch for their company? Like, how often do you see them taking feedback from media houses and bloggers? Does that happen
They do it
often?
very secretively. They do it very, very secretively. They're doing it all the time, and they're not very good at it, but they are constantly looking at the market. You have to understand, most watch companies know how to make a watch, but they don't know what to make. There's very few people in the watch industry that truly have sort of a visionary outlook and say, what can I imagine to make that hasn't been made yet? This is the minority. That's why Jean-Claude Biver was celebrated, mainly because he was a watch lover himself and say, let's make something that hasn't existed yet. Just that alone made him different. And so there's not enough people in the watch industry that have confidence in their own vision to go ahead and make something new. So what do? They look at the market, they ask themselves, what do people seem to want? So they're looking at the market to see what's selling, what's in demand, maybe not as much enough to ask themselves how to refine the products that they have. We have worked with brands to do surveys. I wish they'd do more of it. Honestly, I mean, brands should focus group. They should absolutely focus group. I pitch them on these services all the time. Some brands do it. I think that a lot of it goes down to, again, how their business is set up. They started out years ago and saying, there's this established market for watches out there. As long as we listen to the market, they'll tell us what to make. So that's the way they're wired right now. It's listening to market to know what to make that they think will sell, as opposed to what new things to make that haven't been seen before.
So, or follow up to that, do they even take feedback on the prices?
Sure, but they're contending with the problem that they need to make as much money or more money with selling less watches. I mean, the biggest problem over the last 20 years in the watch industry is gross overproduction. And that has fueled the gray market and basically been because brands have been able to sell into the market more than the market could sell out. And before the internet, these things would just be like brushed off to some outlet mall somewhere or some third world country where, you know, they promise the brands, these watches will quietly go away forever. Then the internet came, and that's where all the gray market watches showed up, and it completely polluted the market such that nobody was spending retail prices anymore. And that's where we're at right now. So I think that we actually are probably going to have to contend with higher prices, but more actual exclusivity, which in the long run will actually help price stability, which should probably make things work out okay.
Cool. Thanks, Ariel. Wonder which media house was telling Thierry Stern to stop 5711.
What's that one more time?
I'm just joking. I'm saying, wonder which media house actually called Thierry Stern and said, "Hey, stop 5711 immediately."
No, honestly, that was a very wise decision for them to make. Remember, when these watches get sold for these ludicrously high prices, the watch brand doesn't make any more money. Only the dealers do. Only these these scalpers do. When the market sells for anything other than a 5711, anything other than $30,000, whatever the retail price was, any penny above that, Patek doesn't make anything. And Patek is seeing things getting out of control. As run like a conservative Swiss bank, which is essentially how they like to think they're being run, they're like, uh-oh, too much volatility. What do you do when there's too much volatility? You just cut everything.
It's getting crazier then. Now, after cutting everything, I think there'll be a phase where it's going to get really crazy, and then maybe it's cooling down as per what they've planned probably. Yeah. So who's going next? I think Prakhar from Jaipur.
Yes. So hi Ariel. Thank you for this superb
Hello.
session, and thank you to Puneet as well. I have just one quick question. So I think most of us as watch collectors and watch lovers would agree to this. Watch collecting as a hobby is a very objective affair. Basically, it's very visual, whether you like something that you see or you don't. So how do you remain to be relevant and objective throughout your reviews in a world where everything is so subjective these days?
It's a very good question. I think it's because I like to try to present my information educationally. I try to help people understand a very dense topic, which is watches. There's a lot of different people that like watches for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of things in a watch that adds value to it. The movement, the design, the materials, the history. There's so many different ways of understanding a watch that no one just entering this hobby has any idea how to do it without some guidance. So I try to give tools that a watch enthusiast anywhere in the world at any age, from hopefully most backgrounds, as long as they understand English, I can't easily translate myself into every language, can use those types of tools and information to go along their own journey. I think the strategy is don't ask anyone to replicate my journey, but show what I do and hope that people will learn lessons from it.
Right. I think that makes so much sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Prakhar. So one last question, guys. I think Ariel needs to sleep now. One last question. Is anyone willing to go?
You have to ask one more. You can't insult me by not asking your last question.
Sure. I have a question. I'll just quickly follow up that you said, there was a lot of, you spoke about focus groups, and like how sometimes brands do approach, different stakeholders to get designs approved. I am of the opinion that this focus group approach has been kind of overused in the industry and has led to bad design. So all of these things where we see these very apparent flaws in kind of whether it's date windows, whether it's proportions, whether it's size versus style, all of these things I think are also a result of too much focus group happening, because then kind of they're working backwards from a brief and then kind of retrofitting all of these elements into watches.
So let's not confuse terms. Maybe you mean design by committee versus focus group.
Sorry. Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah.
So when I say focus group, what I mean is essentially this. We have a brand new idea that we haven't tested anywhere. So it's a new concept. Let's get a group of random people in the room, show it to them, see what they think, and then make a decision based upon that. As opposed to here's a spreadsheet, a matrix of important things that the market seems to want and things historical, and then picking and choosing. So I agree with you. Design by committee, nix that. But focus group, there's not enough of that.
Got it. So you do agree that design by committee has led to like a lot of bad design in the watch world today.
Everything by committee is resulted in everything bad. The reason we have design by committee is that there's this notion of consensus in corporate culture, which I understand, you have to do it. But the reality is that most good corporate decisions are made by like one autocratic ruler. But he or she has to make that decision kind of impolitely. So design by committee is people just trying to be polite and friendly, but that ends up in bad business decisions. So corporations, other than hiring people that have authority versus others, haven't really been able to figure this out.
Thanks.
Right. I think, Ariel, you were there for the session with Max Buzzer we had a couple of weeks back, and he mentioned the same thing, that I make all the decisions in terms of designing, and that's it.
There you go. Max says it's got to be right.
It's got to be right, especially if it's designing something, right? Cool. Thank you so much. I think we are at the end of it. Just one last, not a question, but something to do with India. So what is your opinion about India? Where do you think the community is growing? Do you think the enthusiast community is kind of growing? How is the perception in the US for India right now?
So, yeah. So when I first started getting into the watch industry, it was at the time where the sort of, luxury brands were talking about the BRIC countries. And of course, India was among those. And it was seen as this very exciting growth market. And there was a lot of naivete. First of all, to group all those countries into one thing, like they're all the same or have the same ability to advance, totally wrong. And what I think watch brands started to realize is that, similar to the United States, and actually a lot more so, India is a country, but you can't just enter it with one strategy. There are, again, just the different languages makes it challenging enough to figure out, how do we have a global advertising campaign there, or a national advertising campaign? It doesn't really work. So my experience with India first began hearing from watch brands talking about wanting to get in there, being excited about it as being a growth market, never really trying to figure out how. And then when I got more involved with enthusiasts, I realized that there's a lot of Indian watch collectors out there. Of course, I met a lot here in California. And then, of course, traveling around, there's a lot of Indian people in the watch industry. And it's just, for me, it's one of the cultures that contributes to the watchmaking economy around the world. I don't think the watch industry today would be what it was without there being a lot of Indian people in some part of it. So I think it's the watch industry and Indian culture is inseparable. It really is. Some of the most amusing emails I've ever received have been from collectors in India. Always very intelligent questions, always very pressing questions. I think I've been amused sometimes because I've been given questions that literally, like, I would have to spend 6 or 7 hours answering, and I'm like, are you trying to pay me to write a paper on this? I'm not really sure. So I'm kind of amused sometimes, but I think that the curiosity and desire to be a good collector is something I've seen more so from the Indian collectors I've met than sort of anywhere else. Where in the United States, for example, you're a collector, you don't really care if you know enough information. You basically buy what you can afford, and you're always comfortable not knowing enough. You're always comfortable not looking like you particularly care or anything like that. I think that when the Indian watch collectors I've met care so much, it's so engaging. I always want to have a good conversation. So I have so much joy. I would very much like to travel to India. I've unfortunately not been to India. I don't even know where I would go first. I'd love to see the culture firsthand. I'd like to go there and see, like there's entire brands like Titan and things like that, and so much endemic watches there. I know they're not always fancy ones, but I'd really like to see what the culture is like there. I'm definitely curious, and it's definitely really high on my list of places I want to go to sort of see watch culture in action.
Perfect. For sure. I think your first destination has to be Bombay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
We'll be waiting to welcome you here, right? After the pandemic.
You'll have to show me a very good time. I'm a very demanding person.
Don't worry. We are very hospitable, right? So
thanks everyone. I really appreciate it. I love doing these things. I recognize that being a watch consumer these days is confusing and at times can be really, really frustrating. But at the end of the day, there's great watches out there at price points that are probably better than you think. This is the time to explore, and being a watch collector and as part of the community doesn't and shouldn't mean buying what the community tells you to buy. It's just having fun with these people. Think of watch lovers as being really good prospective friends. I mean, everyone needs more friends these days. Meeting friends as an adult is hard. Some people have hobbies like sports they talk about, and for us, it's watches. We of course have other interests, but when I get together with watch lovers, what I love the most is the other things I learned other than watches, the other things that they're interested in, the other things that they're experts at, the other experiences they had. So I'd say buy watches a little bit in the silo and keep your watch community time strictly friendly.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think we should end the session here with the last thing. One of the questions, I just probably end it with that question is that, yes, we do think sometimes that the media has kind of, influenced us, like we already discussed. And we sometimes feel that we are walking in this tunnel, like a dark tunnel, and all we can see is projections of watches and media giving us all kinds of noises and more like, there's so much information overload there. There's so many things happening out there. But like you very nicely articulated and explained that, yes, it is your personal thing. At the end of the day, media might be to blame if you give them an opportunity to kind of influence you more than what your shoes might fit. That is a different thing. But at the end of the day, it's your personal hobby. It's very, very intimate. It's something you're going to wear for like 8 or 12 hours, or some people wear for 24 hours of the day, right? I mean, on your hand, what else? So
look, I wrote an article, I don't remember, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago. It's called "Are You Being Influenced as a Watch Collector, Watch Consumer?" Read that article. It talks about exactly what you've been referring to. Remember, I try to focus my content as teaching material. If you sense that someone isn't teaching you something, that's okay. Just know it for what it is. And if you are trying to walk along that path of being a watch collector, education is the only way to do it. You talk to any collector with any maturity and you ask them how important education is, and they'll say it is absolutely the top. So use the relationships that you have with one another, with me, to educate yourselves, but never as a suggestion of what to buy.
perfect. Cool. I think Ariel will let you go now. I mean, we can keep on talking, how it is with watches, right? But it's too late.
Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Everyone being in touch. I look forward to next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ariel, for joining in. Thank you,
Ariel.
everyone, for joining in. We'll see you for another session really soon. Keep yourself updated with the social media handles which RedBar Bombay has. And thanks again, Ariel. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Ariel.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Cheers,
you.
bye.
Yes, bye-bye.